Hi, I'm Sue Gold, President of the San Diego Museum of Art Artists Guild, and I welcome you to the announcement of the awards for the Online Winter 2020 exhibition. This video is, instead of our hosting an in-person or an online reception, which would be very difficult during this pandemic. So at the moment, I'd like to say a bit about the San Diego Museum of Art Artists Guild, just in case you don't know who we are. We're made up of professional artists who are focused on exhibiting and selling their artwork in galleries and online. The Artists Guild is the oldest support council of the San Diego Museum of Art. We support the museum with our money and volunteer efforts and strengthen the bond between the museum and the artistic community. We work at the museum to enhance the cultural profile of San Diego and to bring original art to the attention of art collectors. Currently, during this pandemic, we have our board meetings and our artist discussion meetings on Zoom, online. The Artists Guild board is made up of artist members who volunteer their time to guide the interests of the Artists Guild. We are over 100 years old. The Artists Guild was founded in 1915 after the Panama exhibition in San Diego's Balboa Park. We celebrated our centennial in 2015 with an exhibition, 100 Artists, 100 Years, the San Diego Museum of Art, Artists Guild, 1915 to 2015. We will soon be publishing our book, celebrating the Artists Guild and the San Diego Museum of Art. We have as members artists of many different media, such as painters, watercolor, acrylic, oil, and caustics, airbrush, and mixed media. We have printmakers, we have potters, jewelers, masters in drawing, architects, sculptors, using all manners of media, metal, wood, glass, stone, ceramics, found objects, etc. Fabric, enamelware, and digital artists, photographers, and muralists have been and are members. The current exhibition encompasses all of those fields and more. A few of those artists are represented on our rack card in the museum. You can look at our artist work as well as find out how to become a member on the Artists Guild website, www.sdmaag.org. If you go to join us, you'll find out how to become a member and about our artists, tell us about, naturally, our artists. At this point, I'd like to introduce Angelica Villagrana, our past president, membership secretary, and exhibition co-chair. Angelica?
Thank you, Sue. Before COVID, the Artists Guild had approximately 2 to 3 exhibitions annually around galleries in the San Diego community. However, now the world has changed and we had to put everything online. And our winter exhibition, our virtual winter exhibition, since we did not have to worry about wall space, we decided to open it up to non-members also, not only members of the Artists Guild. And I'm really happy to report that we had 390 submissions from 176 artists all around the United States, and even from some foreign countries, including Canada, the United Kingdom, France, Spain, Italy, Sri Lanka, Ukraine, Guatemala, and also China. And I'm happy to report that it was wonderful to get all these various submissions, and we congratulate the artists and thank them very much for helping us with this online exhibition. Also, I would really also thank our juror, Ken Goldman, who had a very difficult task to choose out of those 390 about 120 entries for the show. And you can imagine how difficult it is because there were many fine works, and he had to really, unfortunately, not put some of them into the show. So we apologize, but we could only accommodate 120 pieces. I also would like to mention that the Artists Guild uses the blind jurying process. That means that the juror sees only the images and not the names. So it is very fair, and it's up to the juror, of course, to decide what he wants to put into the show. Now, I would like to introduce our juror, whom we owe a big thanks, Ken Goldman. Ken is a wonderful, talented artist, teacher, author, and also an art juror. He is a past president of the National Watercolor Society. He has exhibited in shows all over the United States, Europe, China, and he is also, and I like to mention that particularly, he's included in the book that Sue mentioned earlier, The 100 Artists, which commemorates 100 exceptional guild members from 1915 to 2015 for the anniversary of the Artists Guild. And now I'll hand it over to Ken. Thank you, Ken.
Thanks, Angelica, and thank you, Sue. And I want to just re-emphasize something that Angelica mentioned. You had 390. I'm going to round it out to 400 because it seemed like an awful lot of entries. And when I was asked, how many would be included, and originally it was going to be about 110, I think, something like that.
Yeah.
And I asked to have more included since it is an online show, partially because what I found in the past, because some of the shows I jury have more than 1,000 images that I have to go through. So in a lot of ways, this one was a relief. A lot of times at the end, you have enough really fine paintings to create 2 or 3 more exhibitions of work that had to be turned away. And it really has nothing more to do than space for most of them. There are a few that probably shouldn't have entered, but very few. I mean, for the most part, this particular exhibition was fascinating. I learned a lot, actually. There was a multiplicity of entries that were different. And occasionally, I know that some people entered up to 5 pieces, and it was my intention to try and include only 1 from each artist. That was my original intention. But what I found later, after I heard that I had done multiples, was that a lot of the artists submitted things that were not even necessarily consistent. They were different, and they were so good, each in their own way, that I ended up including, I think, in one case, up to 4 pieces. There were a couple of artists where I did see a similarity, and I just liked their work so much I decided to put them in. But for the most part, I was trying to I would have liked to have gotten everybody into the show. If there had been 390 openings, I would have put everybody in the exhibition. So I just want it to be clear. And the other thing is, I don't know the artist. I sometimes will recognize a style, but when I do, I can assure the artist that I have learned to be very unbiased. And I just set my knowledge of them aside and look at their paintings in terms of the composition, the value structure, the intent, if it's narrative or not. And that's what I go for. As far as the awards, I asked for 3 extra honorable mentions because I really do like to have the flexibility to give some of the fine paintings a little bit more exposure. So I added 3 more, so we have a total of 6 honorable mentions. And as far as the first, second, and third, what I decided was I wanted to have a non-objective piece, a representational piece, and a sculpture. And the reason I decided on that was because there were so many fine representational pieces, there were really fine sculptures, and there was fine non-objective ones. So with that, I'd like to just discuss the honorable mentions and the first, second, and third place winners. The thing I really like about this piece, well, first of all, one of the things I look for right away is different quadrants. I look for if I were to divide a painting in half, one of the things that I found challenging about this was the main focal point is kind of right in the center, and I wasn't sure if I liked that at first, but then I went a step further and I was looking at the overall rhythm of the piece. And if I divide this piece into quadrants and look at the lower left and the lower right and the upper right and upper left, and look for each one to be a little bit different from the other, I found that to be the case. And this has a circular composition that kind of leads you back into the fact that this woman is throwing a ball out there and the dogs just can't wait to go out and get one. So I kind of overcame my original kind of hesitation about the central figure so centralized, and decided it was done so well and there was so much action, it definitely deserved an honorable mention. I love the whimsy, I love the composition, I like the idea that it's a takeoff of the Wizard of Oz. No red shoes, try wishing on a dandelion. But mostly the idea of doing a three-dimensional piece that has such a great connection to its background, I find really intriguing. And I just think overall, with the dynamism, the choice of colors, each corner of the quadrant being so different, this was a real winner. And so I'm happy to have given it an honorable mention. I don't know who Janet Perkins is, but I do love this piece. It's almost completely non-objective. I would call it semi-abstract. There are somewhat recognizable forms. It has a wonderful discipline in the colors. In a sense, it's a secondary complementary color scheme of orange, green, and violet. But the orange is just a small bit that you kind of sense in a few of the little dots and pieces. But because it has such a beautiful color harmony and such a wonderful diversity of shapes and textures, I just knew when I saw it, I had to hold it out for at least an honorable mention, and I'm glad I did. I'm looking at it more closely now, and I see some angels in there, and I didn't really see it in that way as much as I did for an overall composition. So anyway, it's just a great piece with just wonderful variety. There were many, many non-objective and semi-abstract paintings that I could have also included. It's just that it gets to a point at the end where you just have to make a decision.
Right.
And then especially it's hard when you have to let certain pieces go completely. Well, I just, once again, it's lovely. I love the composition, the upright format is really, really wonderful. And I can't really tell if those pieces at the top are faces or what they are, but they leave so much room for the viewer to enter in to the composition. The colors are fantastic in this. Here you have a kind of a complementary painting again. You've got your blues against your oranges, but with a little bit of an analogous spin. So you have a little bit of the blue next to the green, and then you have a little red next to the orange. The textures are fantastic. There's a great flow to this piece. Each quadrant, in other words, each corner is different from the other, which is part of the reason it's so dynamic. And I also like the fact that you have that wonderful curve in there that contrasts to the uprightness of the overall composition. I suppose it's evident by now that I'm a colorist. I love color. A lot of times I don't like a color that has so many non-neutrals in it. I love the way neutrals set off color. But in this case, I think the balance is phenomenal. And I also like the consistency of, you have sort of square angulars in contrast to circular shape. And then you've got large shapes against a little busy focal point. And there's just something about this piece that to me is very joyful. And certainly the orange and the blue stand out right away, but that orange and blue, the way they kind of sandwich the focal point, which is all the, I think it's Dia de la Muerta images on the altar, makes that for sure the focal point. And all the other beautiful, brightly colored pieces actually then, even though they're bright, they retreat. Once again, each of the corners have great variety, the quadrants. And that's a criteria that I have when I look at a piece, and I find it more than often makes something work or not. Anyway, it looks like a combination of cutout and painting, and I'm fascinated by it, and I love it. I love that RIP on the green one at the top. Rest in peace. This is after all the paintings were selected. Angelica sent me the websites, and I had a chance to look at everybody's websites to make sure. I wanted to make sure that the pieces I selected were consistent with the artist's abilities, and they all were. And this one is interesting because it's painted in plein air on mahogany. I didn't know that when I picked it out, but what I loved about it was the vertical strokes throughout. And I wanted a nice representational piece that was somewhat lyrical, and I found it in this. I also, I love the variety in the cloud shapes. The perspective is pretty flawless. A lot of times when I'm teaching a plein air, I teach a course called Plein Air in the Golden Hour. And when we go into situations where you're looking down at a cove or a bay, people make them too round. They make it look as if you're up in an airplane looking down. And this artist really understood perspective and made that bay very elliptical, which is what it should be at his particular eye level, which is at about the same height as the top of those palm trees back there. You can see the horizon line, and of course lower. Okay. Anyway, the dominance of blue with the touches of yellows and violets, and then just little accents of red, to me just made this a wonderful example. Plus it was painted on wood, which I thought was pretty fascinating for a plein air piece. Well done. One of the design principles of design that I think is, there's two really important ones of the 8 principles of design. One of them is dominance, and the other is contrast. And the dominance clearly in this, this is almost a completely non-objective piece. I wouldn't say that it's completely non-objective because I can recognize some of the images, but it's a dominance of green, isn't it? And it's also a dominance of angular shapes that are contrasted by beautiful circular shapes. So you have this hard edge situation contrasted by a soft, more flowing situation. Then you also have big shapes that are in contrast to little shapes. So you have both dominance and contrast really well represented. You also have asymmetrical or dynamic balance, which is another one of the design principles. You see how nicely the basket is set off to the side. And everything is a little bit different from everything else. One of the things that I like in this is every shape is a little different from every other shape. And it's a little different than traditional color theory, and where you usually put a little dab of one color in every other color you mix. Well, more modern artists tend to vary each red a little bit from the other one. Each green is a little different from the other. And there's enough gray in the background to really set off the more high-key greens that are in the foreground. So I just think this is a really lovely composition, and I was really happy to give it a major award. I did recognize other pieces that this artist had entered. I could tell mostly because of the very vigorous brushwork she had in all of her paintings. And it was real hard for me to decide. I would have included more paintings of hers if I could have, but I decided I wanted to really try and just get one from each person. I may have actually included more of hers and just violated my rule, but if I did, I apologize. And if I didn't, there you go. This is one of my favorites because it reminds me almost of a little after the Renaissance, maybe like a Spanish painting, but it's done in a very contemporary way. I understand now that it's a self-portrait, and the vigorous brushwork that I saw in all of this artist's work kind of culminated in this piece. And I just love the intensity and the power of this composition. It's just, actually, we have similar glasses. But that aside, there's a really wonderful repetition of ovals in it. I really don't see much of a straight other than in the nose piece and the ear pieces of the eyeglasses and maybe the mouth. So you have a little bit of a contrast of a horizontal linears to a dominance of circular shapes. So, and then other than that, the features are really well placed, and in this painterly way, the nose is done so nicely. I can see in the lips, the 3 parts of the upper lip and the 2 parts of the lower lip, when you come to talking about anatomy. So all of these things really please me about this piece. Plus, it's a dominance of red with accents of black and white. It's just a lovely painting. Unfortunately, I only had one view to look at when I was jurying, but based on this one view, when I saw it, I just went, oh my gosh, this is a real winner. And I love sculpture, and I love the fact that there were so many wonderful sculptures entered into this exhibition. I don't think if I did reject a sculpture, it's only because of space, because I think all the sculptures were really fantastic that were entered. There was a couple that weren't shot to the fullest light effects, and I asked them to have them reshot, and I think that people will really appreciate them. But this piece has so much power, and if you get a chance, now that I know who the artist is, I did go to the website, and this artist works mostly in combination with stone and castings. And this piece is actually somewhat different from some of the others. I think it might be a more recent piece, but it just has so much power and so much, gravitas. I don't know what the word is exactly. It's just beautiful and upright. And I just get a sense of good character from it. This piece, I can't say too much about it because it doesn't have a lot of the attributes of a painting, but it just has the strength of a sculpture. And I loved it enough to give it a first place.
Thank you for joining us, and a big thank you to Angelica and Ken and everyone who entered the exhibition and to those who assisted in setting it up. To look at the exhibition on the Artists Guild website, click on the slide that announces this exhibition. And I'm going to say goodbye now, and please stay safe.